Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise today and speak about tax fairness. I'm proud to be part of a government that does so much in terms of tax fairness.
Very happy to rise this afternoon and speak on the Opposition Day motion regarding tax fairness, because our government's record after 2 years speaks for itself, and I'm glad to comment on it. First of all, Mr. Speaker, in preparation for today's opposition motion, I went back and looked at our budgets for the last 2 years that we presented. And I looked at Budget 2016 and our platform to create a stronger middle class, which we are doing through the lowest unemployment rate over 40 years and the fastest economic growth rate that we've seen in probably 10, 15 years. So a lot of great things are happening. I looked at what was in the first budget we presented, Budget 2016, and then I looked at what was in Budget 2017 on tax fairness, on fighting tax avoidance, on fighting tax evasion. And if we look at Budget 2016 and we take out some of the comments from there, you know, we see Canada and other members of the G20 and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development have worked together to develop recommendations aimed at addressing base erosion and profit sharing. We've joined our international partners to fight tax avoidance and tax evasion. As part of its commitment to protect the integrity of the Canadian tax base, the Government of Canada is acting on certain recommendations of the BEPS projects. Budget 2016 proposed new legislation to strengthen transfer pricing, documentation, by introducing country-by-country reporting for large multinational enterprises. Mr. Speaker, I wish to add that I will be splitting my time today with my honourable colleague and friend, the member from Davenport. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the CRA is applying revised international guidance on transfer pricing for multinational enterprises, which provides improved interpretation of the arm's length principle. And thirdly, Mr. Speaker, Canada is participating in international work to develop multilateral instruments to streamline the implementation of treaty-related BEPS recommendations, including addressing treaty abuse. Mr. Speaker, we also enhanced domestic tax integrity. We looked at how high net worth individuals are using private corporations or CCPCs inappropriately to reduce or defer tax. To help address this, we put into place numerous measures in our first budget in 2016, including limiting the use of the multiplication of the small business tax credit or the $500,000 small business tax deduction. Mr. Speaker, that was done to ensure that all individuals are paying their fair share of taxes in this country, to ensure that we have the revenues needed to pay for those programs that Canadians use day in, day out, and Canadians value. Mr. Speaker, we also put into place measures that would ensure that investment income derived from associated corporations' active business is ineligible for the small business deduction in certain circumstances. We also closed tax loopholes that allowed private corporations to use a life insurance policy to distribute amounts tax-free that otherwise would be taxable. More measures were put in place in Budget 2017, including an additional $444 million that was placed into the CRA so they could have the tools and the resources to combat tax avoidance and tax evasion, and yes, to bring about tax fairness for all Canadians coast to coast to coast. This was on top of the first $500 million we put into place. Now, Budget 2017, we estimated that we would be able to recover, CRA would be able to recover $2.6 billion in additional federal revenues. And, Mr. Speaker, the good work to recover those funds continues. Initial steps have been taken to prevent wealthy individuals from using private corporations to inappropriately reduce their tax payable. We've closed tax loopholes on other measures. We've entered into agreements and we've started to introduce the legislation that was passed from BIA in 2016 on BEPS. We've eliminated ineffective and inefficient tax measures, and we've also provided greater consistency in tax treatment of similar types of income with and other government priorities and current economic conditions. We've also given CRA, which I think we think about as the most proud thing in terms of this measure, we've given CRA the tools to fight tax avoidance and tax evasion, which the prior government across the aisle cut. They actually cut money and funds from CRA. They didn't give them the tools and the resources that they needed to do their job. And, Mr. Speaker, in 2 years, we've given resources and invested the funds necessary for CRA to do its job. They've increased verification activities. CRA has hired additional auditors and specialists with a focus on the underground economy. They've developed robust business intelligence infrastructure and risk assessment assessment to target high-risk international tax and abusive tax avoidance cases. And they've improved the quality of investigative work that targets criminal tax evaders. Mr. Speaker, those are only small parts of the measures that were done in the budget 2016 and budget 2017. Both budgets aims at strengthening the middle class, helping those working hard to join the middle class. And Mr. Speaker, our work is not done. We've done a lot more. First of all, on tax fairness, we've cut the small business tax rate from 11% to 9%. When these measures are fully enacted, every single business in Canada, from coast to coast to coast, will have a reduction in their taxes payable by $7,500. That is $7,500, Mr. Speaker, that they can use to invest in HR training, capital, equipment, to give a raise to their workers. Mr. Speaker, that is the work that we're doing. We've cut middle-class taxes for 9 million Canadians. Over 5 years, it's about $25 billion in tax relief that will go to 9 million Canadians working hard every day, so they'll have more money to save, to invest, to spend on their kids, and so forth. We've eliminated income splitting, which the prior government brought in, which is the most regressive form of taxation policy, which only benefited the wealthiest in Canada. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I would hasten to add, I don't know why the prior government introduced that measure, because it was so regressive. It was so unfair to the majority of working Canadians across this country, to the majority of middle-class Canadians, and we've eliminated that. And with that, we brought in the Canadian Child Benefit, which benefits 9 out of 10 Canadian families on average $2,300 more per year. Mr. Canadians, the CCB is tax-free, it's simple, it's monthly, and it's helping to lift Canadians out of poverty, and most importantly, it's helping to lift Canadian children out of poverty, and we should all be proud of that. On the CCPC, Mr. Speaker, we consulted with Canadians on how to make our tax system more efficient, more fair, and after the summer consultations, we came back and tackled income sprinkling, which is a measure, Mr. Speaker, that was used by certain high net worth individuals across this country that was unfair. It was allowing them to reduce their taxes payable to levels that were unfair to other Canadians, and it was allowing two individuals with the same income to avoid and create a big differential in things. Another thing we reversed was on the TSFA. The prior government would have doubled the TSFA amount to $10,000 when we know the foregone revenue from that doubling would have impacted programs in the future, my children's programs. Well, we know that the only individuals in Canada that could have afforded that $10,000 a year would have been wealthy individuals. Mr. Speaker, less than 10% of Canadians max out their TSFA at the $5,500 level currently. Shame on the other side for bringing in that measure. Shame on them. We strengthened the Canada Pension Plan. We enhanced it for future generations. In my riding alone, the guaranteed income supplement increase benefited over 2,000 of my most vulnerable seniors, up to $800 each this year. That is the good work our government is doing. That is the good work that Canadians elected us to do. Mr. Speaker, we continue on looking at ways to boost and to bring in tax fairness. I'm proud to say I was the committee member on the Finance Committee that invited our National Revenue Minister to come to committee. That was I was the member on the Finance Committee that brought forward the motion to look at tax avoidance and tax evasion. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of the work that we did as committee members in producing a report that we brought forth to the National Revenue Minister, and the number of the recommendations within that report, and if you look at what's been replied from the National Revenue Minister, a number of those recommendations have been fulfilled. Mr. Speaker, I am proud of what our government has done on this issue with regards to tax fairness. That is what our government is about. Those are the resources we've implemented into CRA. You know, you look at our record for offshore-related files alone. Since the end of the year, the Canada Revenue Agency is conducting audits on more than 1,090 taxpayers and is criminally investigating more than 20 cases of tax evasion. The CRA, with the resources we've implemented, has the resources to risk assess 100% of large multinational corporations annually and is better able to identify those taxpayers who participate in aggressive tax avoidance schemes. Mr. Speaker, we've done a lot. We are cooperating with our partners internationally to tackle such issues as transfer pricing. We're cooperating on BEPS, which is coming into force. We're making sure that CRA has the resources to tackle complex, multi-level cases of tax evasion. That is what a government does. A government stands up for middle-class Canadians, working-class Canadians, working very, very hard every day to ensure that they have the resources to make a great living, to have a brighter future for their children, but also ensure that all Canadians, coast to coast to coast, all companies coast to coast, are paying their fair share of taxes. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank the member for his comments. Though I'll ask him a very specific question. Does that mean, since he supports the intent of the NDP motion, that he will be voting in favour of it next Tuesday to include these two measures in the budget for 2018?
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Merci beaucoup pour cette question, the honourable member from Columbia.
Thank you very much for the question.
Madame la Présidente,
Madam Speaker, this is why this government wants to fight tax evasion and tax avoidance. There will be $1 billion in our budget, which we will use to transform the Canada Revenue Agency into an agency which works for Canadians, especially when it comes to a fair tax system. Canadians expect that we will continue to act in this way. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Courtenay Alberni.
Madam Speaker, I think there's a huge confusion here about what tax fairness is, and I appreciate my colleague for his speech and outlining all of the measures that the Liberal government's taken. But let's take a quick look at those measures. They talk about a middle-class tax break, but it only benefited people mostly that earn between $50 and $100 an hour. Anyone who earned $23 an hour or less got nothing. Madam Speaker, they talked about the small business tax cut. Well, the Minister of Tourism and Small Business and the government House Leader said it's a great soundbite. This is a year ago. But it's not practical. The only reason they supported it is they were in quicksand, Madam Speaker, when they brought forward their changes to small business. And in fact, they attacked small business. They went after Canadian-controlled companies, yet publicly traded companies didn't get any of the same measures imposed on them. And Madam Speaker, I think that we just want a simple answer. We know that CEOs in our country shouldn't be getting a tax loophole that costs Canadians almost $1 billion, while small business people, while hardworking Canadians are paying their fair share of taxes. They talk about spending $1 billion. $1 billion chasing who? Small business people and hardworking people. Close the loophole, Madam Speaker. We need the member to answer why they haven't closed this loophole.
The honourable member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Je vous dis merci de mon...
I'd like to say thank you to my honourable colleague.
It's a central pillar in the first budget in 2016, budget 2016 and 2017. Tax fairness is a continuing pillar for our government to build a strong country and to build a strong middle class, because we know when the middle class works, our economy works. With reference to my honourable colleague's comment about where the tax cut took place, 9 million Canadians benefited from that tax loss. When you study the tax system, those earning between $0 and, say, $30,000, most of them, and majority of them, actually don't have any taxes payable because of the way our tax system has worked through a number of tax credits and also through the exemption amount up to like $13,000, $14,000. So if you studied that portion, you would know that they actually don't have any tax paying. So a tax cut wouldn't assist on that part. We targeted a tax cut that benefited 9 million Canadians, $25 billion of tax relief. That is something that has shown up in our economic results. That is something that is benefiting our economy today and tomorrow. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Conversation about tax fairness is truly a conversation about trust. We brought in a tax system, the one that we currently have, largely in the 1970s. Since that time, it has become incredibly complex, and so now we're looking at putting in some significant measures around incentivizing people in the economy to have more money and other aspects to go after those that are evading and avoiding taxes. So the conversation is really about the aggregate of all those measures. I wonder if my honourable colleague could tell us not each one of the specific measures, but how all of those measures in conjunction with each other are making our system much more fair and doing the right thing for the middle class in tax fairness. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Very brief answer from the member from Vaughan Woodbridge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to my honourable friend and colleague who I get to represent the great region of York Region with. I'd like to say when our government was elected, like I said, the pillar for one of our platform policies was tax fairness, and we've been looking at the entire tax system to eliminate those measures that are inefficient, that don't benefit a majority of Canadians, that are regressive, and we are doing that, whether it's getting rid of the income splitting that the prior government brought into place, whether it's limiting the $500,000 business tax deduction that only benefited wealthy Canadians and which was being used inappropriately by many businesses. We've done that, and we are growing our economy. Our results show to date 700,000 new jobs since we formed government. Thank you, Madam.
Reprise de débat, resuming debate. The honourable member for